Hi folks, Matt Easton here. So this is another one in my series of the movie fight review, and a number of my viewers have asked me to review this fight in the film The Patriot, or The Patriot, depending how you prefer to pronounce it. First of all, I should mention, of course, that the film is utterly unhistorical and quite almost offensive to anyone who actually knows about the history of the American War of Independence. But laying that aside, I'm just going to look at the fight itself. So here we've got Lucius Malfoy versus Mel Gibson. Okay, there goes Mad Max, and of course we can tell what's going to happen fairly early on because he's running towards someone on a horse, carrying a flagpole, a banner, essentially a flagpole, American flagpole, which is very clearly going to be used as a spear. Okay, and here we go. He comes in, and as predicted, ooh, let's go here so you can see. Da, 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 whee, there he goes. Awesome. Is that plausible? Yeah, that's pretty good actually. I think that's quite cool. Something similar to this, of course, was done with spears in the Middle Ages, but also bayonets in this period quite commonly. So yeah, planting the back end of a spear into the ground pretty much, like a schiltron used in Northern Welsh and Scottish warfare. Certainly effective against cavalry. Presumably the horse and the rider didn't exactly see what was coming, and so he rode straight into it, and as expected, the horse, if it didn't die, at least was very badly wounded, and the rider goes flying over the head. And luckily he seems to have come off not too badly injured. Mel Gibson, and this is quite unusual for a Hollywood film then, and I know that the meaning of the bullet is poignant, relating to the death of his son, but somewhat unusual for Hollywood, where the hero has actually decided he is going to shoot the bad guy rather than fight him mano a mano. There we go. But a big explosion behind wrecks his plans, and the bullet goes slightly astray and just wounds his opponent in the left arm. Okay, fairly accurate there. And I should mention here, a pistol bullet is relatively small caliber, certainly of the type of pistol that Mel Gibson was using there. And a bullet would, even if it got stuck in the arm or passed through the arm, it would hurt, but it's not of immediate danger. So that's relatively realistic. You can see the nice bullet hole in his jacket there. Okay, and there we go. So what's really interesting about this fight, and I guess the reason why a lot of people requested that I cover it, is because we've got Mel Gibson here with a tomahawk and a knife, and there we've got we've got his opponent, Tarleton, using a cavalry sabre. I should mention as well, actually, the weapons in this film are pretty well researched. The sword is indeed a type of sword that was in use by British officers, and American officers in fact, in the 1770s. And of course the frontier hawk, the tomahawk, and various types of hunting knife were of course widespread amongst American settlers. I should also mention that there were different styles of tomahawk, for those who don't know. I might do a future video about tomahawks actually. Mel Gibson actually seems to be using a pipe hawk, probably of an English made or American made design. There were other types of tomahawk which seemed for some reason to be less featured in Hollywood movies. Some of them were made in France, some of them were used particularly by the French-speaking or French-allied Indian tribes that had a spike on the back, and various other styles. There was the so-called spontoon tomahawk, which has a pointed blade instead of the typical kind of little hatchet blade. So there's different types of tomahawk, but they've given Mel Gibson a fairly stereotypical example. Now, a fight between a guy with a sabre and a guy with a tomahawk and a knife. Very clearly, the guy with the sabre is going to have the big reach advantage. Okay, he can pretty much have free reign of targeting Mel Gibson's extremities, so to speak, for example his legs or his arms, and Mel Gibson's is a really big disadvantage here because he doesn't have any hand protection on his knife or his tomahawk, and they're both very short weapons. Now, if you've got a knife and a tomahawk and you're fighting a guy with a sabre, what should you try to do? Essentially you should try and parry, obviously, defend yourself, but whilst you're doing it, close in. Mel Gibson wants to be able to take the fight to the distance where his tomahawk and his knife will be in their element. What he doesn't want to do is maintain the distance that exists at the moment, which actually plays into the sabreur's hands, into the guy with the sabre. At the moment they're at sabre range, and that's not good for Mel, and that is good for Mr. Malfoy over here. Okay, Jeremy Isaacs, I think his name is. There we go, bam, bam, bam. Now, this is all pretty good. Let's just try and pause on a nicer picture. Oh, there we go, a bit more face. Right, this is pretty good. So, the sabre man here is swinging a bit wildly, but I think we can forgive him for this because it's battlefield conditions. He's just been thrown off a horse and someone's just shot him in the arm, and he's basically going, ah, I'm going to kill you. Okay, so for dramatic effect, I don't have a problem with that. From a sensible fighting point of view, it's a bit silly that he's flailing so wildly, okay? Because that's actually playing into Mel Gibson's hands. The person who's got the short weapons is kind of hoping for the sword guy to swing wildly like this, because if they do that, it's pretty much easy to parry and close, parry and move in. If instead the sabre guy kept the weapon out in front of him and kept cutting, keeping the weapon in front, it would be really, really difficult. Dare I say, well, I won't say impossible, but very, very difficult for the tomahawk guy to deal with. A tomahawk, and I can't reiterate this enough, a tomahawk alone has a massive disadvantage against a sabre. A tomahawk and knife, I would say, still has a disadvantage against a sabre, even though it's a bit more equal because you've got two weapons to, you can, you know, join them together to parry, and obviously you can parry and hit at the same time and things like this. Okay, he is dual wielding, to use the phrase. Okay, so there we go. So now Mel's on the attack, and he's doing it right. He's pressing the distance. He's pushing in, and he's getting to the distance whereby he can actually hit with his tomahawk and with his knife. And the sabre guy is now having to defend, and in defending he can't riposte very effectively because his opponent is too close to him. His ability to attack back is being stifled. And here we go. Whoa, Mel's going a bit wild now. Oh, and it's gone back the other way. So there was interesting bits. So the guy with the sabre basically punched Mel Gibson in the face with the hilt of his sword. This is a really good thing to do if you're using a sword and the opponent gets too close to you for you to be able to use the edge or the point of your weapon. You've essentially got two main options at that point. You either grab them or hit them with part of your body, or you hit them with the back end of your sword or whatever other weapon you're using. Okay, so that's good, I like that. Good technique. And of course, after he pommeled Mel in the face, he also then cut him. He did a drawing cut on his arm. Here we go, Mel's going in with a tomahawk and knife. I think he didn't have the knife until this point, actually. There we go. It's all good, it's pretty good. The only thing I'd perhaps criticise at this point is a kind of cinematography point, that they're doing a lot of cuts, they're doing a lot of editing, so you can't always see clearly what's going on. And for people who enjoy watching fights, it's nicer to be able to see a little bit more of the technique, and they're chopping and changing in and out. But again, that's the director's choice, really. It's not the choreographer's fault. What they're doing in choreography seems to be pretty good at this point. Right, so there we go. So Sabre guy took a big swing, and Mel, unwisely at this point, stuck his tomahawk out to try and parry it, and the tomahawk gets hit out of his hand. Relatively realistic, and this links to one of my earlier videos where I talked about axes and other weapons which have the ability to hook. Remember that when you hook onto something, not only are you hooking it, but you are hooking yourself to it. And in this situation, by parrying with the tomahawk, the blade either will bite into the wood or slide up to the head and actually pull the tomahawk out of your hand. Okay, and so that's, you know, that's something that could plausibly happen in a fight between a guy with a sabre and a guy with a tomahawk. So Mel now is basically beaten at this point. He's getting cut up by Sabre guy, and he's picked up a musket and a bayonet. Obviously, as film viewers, we know that that's going to be important to what happens next. And then this is really, what's about to happen here is my big gripe, is my big thing that I don't like about this fight. I think it's more or less been all okay. It's been a bit wild and flaily, but it's a movie and they're supposed to be tired and emotional and everything else. This is the thing which really annoys me and which I really don't like. And why? Okay, I'm going to pause it on the right moment, you'll see, and then I'll... Here he goes, he does a little monologue, just as they always do in films, and... oh, there we go. Right. What is he doing? Okay, he's got his opponent literally on his knees, bleeding, wounded, at his mercy. And we see this over and over and over again in films and TV. Okay, and I know why it's done, but it becomes really annoying when it's done over and over and over and over again. And you can see it in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and countless other films, Lady Hawk, loads of other films, where the bad guy has beaten the good guy, and the good guy's there either on the floor or kneeling or prone in some other way, and the bad guy, instead of just going stab or cut or whatever weapon he's got, or bang with the gun, instead of doing the simple "I'm going to kill you now," he launches into a monologue and then takes his weapon and goes like this, goes, "Oh, I'm going to hit you, I'm going to hit you, I'm still going to hit you," and gives them a huge amount of time to kill them. It's really, really annoying. And like I say, I can understand why it's done for dramatic effect, but when it gets used so much and so overused in so many films, man, that's really annoying. He had the fight won. Okay, all he had to do was take his sabre and go thrust or chop in Mel's neck or head, and that would have been it. End of fight. So, there we go. I would say this fight is actually a nicely choreographed fight. Unusual weapon combinations, the weapons themselves are historical to the time. It's great that they thought about this unusual contrast between sword versus tomahawk and knife, and even a use of a bayonet at the end. But for me, as a fencer, martial artist, as a should we say a connoisseur of movie fights, which is why I do these movie fight reviews, the whole thing is kind of ruined by the ridiculously over-dramatic "I'm gonna swing my sword, I'm gonna chop my head off for 5 minutes while you prepare yourself and stick a bayonet through me." And this is used, it's overused in too many films and too many TV shows. But I will finish off by saying, overall, I like the fight. Okay, cheers guys, bye.